What if everything you were taught to believe turned out to be only the beginning of the truth? What if a single moment of divine encounter could unravel generations of tradition and set your entire family on a collision course with destiny? This isn't just another conversion story. This is a journey that will challenge your understanding of courage, shake your perception of faith, and reveal how the relentless love of Jesus breaks through the most unlikely barriers to reach the most unexpected hearts. My name is Gabriela Moreno, and I grew up in a remote village nestled in the mountains of Costa Rica, where the morning mist clung to the valleys and everyone knew everyone else's business. Our small community revolved around my father's voice. He was the imam of our modest mosque, a man whose words carried weight in every home, whose approval was sought by all, and whose disapproval was quietly feared. From my earliest memories, I was shaped by the rhythm of prayer 5 times daily, the cadence of memorized verses I recited without fully understanding, and the unspoken rule that faith was never to be questioned, only obeyed. I wanted nothing more than to make my father proud. Our home constantly filled with visitors seeking his counsel, his prayers, his blessings. I would sit cross-legged near the doorway, absorbing the murmur of conversations, watching faces light up or darken depending on his words. Sometimes, in the quiet spaces between prayers, I wondered if God truly heard us or if our words simply dissolved into the air like smoke. But I never dared voice these thoughts. Doubt was a forbidden guest in our household. When uncertainty crept into my young heart, my mother would place her gentle hand on my shoulder and whisper, "Simply trust, Gabriela." So I did, or at least I convinced myself I did. Everything shifted on an ordinary morning when I was 10 years old. I woke before the first call to prayer while darkness still blanketed the village. But my room wasn't dark. A warmth surrounded me, soft and golden like sunlight, though dawn was still an hour away. I sat up, thinking perhaps I'd forgotten to turn off a lamp, but every switch was off. The warmth wasn't coming from any earthly source. It simply existed, gentle and all-encompassing. And with it came a peace I had no vocabulary to describe. It felt as though an invisible presence filled my small room, not threatening or frightening but protective and kind, as if someone who loved me deeply was standing guard while I slept. That entire day felt different. Colors seemed brighter. My steps felt lighter. At school, I found myself smiling at classmates I normally avoided, even the girl who constantly mocked the way I wore my hijab. Her taunts rolled off me like water off stone. I felt washed clean from the inside out, as if my heart had been scrubbed free of all the small angers and fears I'd carried without realizing their weight. When I returned home that afternoon, I told my mother about the strange light. She frowned slightly, suggesting it must have been a dream, but I knew better. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I whispered into the darkness, "Whoever you are, thank you." I had no idea that this simple prayer was the first word of a conversation that would eventually transform not just my life, but my father's, my family's, and ripple outward to touch my entire village. The days following that encounter were marked by a subtle but undeniable shift within me. The peace didn't fade. Instead, it settled deeper, like roots growing into soil. I began to sense something I can only describe as a gentle voice, not audible to my ears but clear to my heart. When anger flared, the voice reminded me to show kindness. When fear crept in, it whispered reassurance. When I felt compelled to hold a grudge, it nudged me toward forgiveness. I learned to pray not from obligation or fear, but from something that felt remarkably like love. One humid afternoon after school, I sat beneath the sprawling mango tree in our backyard, half-heartedly reviewing my Arabic lessons. The warmth came again, sudden and complete, wrapping around me like an embrace. My heart quickened, not with alarm but with anticipation. I felt a gentle prompting, almost like words without sound, "Look beyond what's written." I didn't understand what that meant, but the phrase echoed in my mind for hours. That evening, my father returned from the mosque exhausted from a full day of teaching. I wanted desperately to tell him what I was experiencing, but fear held my tongue. What if he thought I was being foolish or, worse, disrespectful? So I simply smiled and helped my mother prepare his meal. Later, when the house fell silent and everyone had retreated to their rooms, I knelt beside my bed and whispered to the presence I couldn't see but somehow knew was listening. "Are you Allah?" I asked quietly. "Why do you make me feel so loved?" No voice answered, but a memory surfaced, something my teacher had mentioned in passing about a man named Isa who healed the broken and brought peace wherever he walked. Some called him a prophet. Others claimed he was something more. As I thought of him, tears spilled down my cheeks, and that same warmth enveloped me again, stronger this time. Over the following weeks, I began dreaming of a man whose face remained just out of focus, but who carried light with him like a cloak. Each dream left me with a peace so profound I woke with tears on my pillow. In one dream, he placed his hand on my shoulder and spoke words I felt rather than heard. "I love you. I've chosen you to show my love to others, even when they won't understand." I shared these dreams with no one, not my closest friends, not even my mother. But I could feel myself changing. I wanted to help others, to offer kindness without expecting anything in return. The gentle voice in my heart grew clearer each day, and it made me desperate to know who Isa truly was. From that moment forward, I couldn't stop thinking about Isa, the man of peace who walked through my dreams. Was he simply one prophet among many, or was there something more to him that I'd never been taught? I needed to know, but I had to tread carefully. In our tight-knit community, asking questions about other faiths could cause serious trouble, especially for the imam's daughter. One afternoon after school, I slipped into the small public library near the market, a place my father rarely visited. My hands trembled as I scanned the shelves until I found a section labeled World Religions. Tucked between other volumes was a small, worn Spanish Bible. As I pulled it from the shelf, I felt that familiar warmth wash over me. "Please help me understand," I whispered under my breath. I began reading slowly from the Gospel of Luke. The stories about Jesus pierced my heart in ways I didn't expect. He healed people that society rejected. He forgave those who hurt him. He taught his followers to love their enemies and bless those who cursed them. This was radically different from the religious fear I'd grown up with. Each page felt like light entering the deepest, darkest corners of my soul. When I reached the account of his death and resurrection, I cried quietly in that library corner, tears dripping onto the delicate pages. Something deep within me whispered again, confirming what my heart was beginning to believe. This was true. He really did rise from the dead. And that same whisper added words that changed everything. He loves you too. That discovery, I visited the library every week, hiding the Bible in my school bag beneath textbooks and notebooks. I read whenever I could steal a moment. On the bus ride home, in the quiet space behind the mosque when no one was watching, late at night under my blanket with a flashlight creating a small circle of illumination. The more I read, the clearer it became that Jesus wasn't just another prophet in a long line of holy men. He was alive. He was present. And he was calling me to follow him. But fear began growing alongside faith. I knew that if my father discovered what I was doing, his heart would shatter. In our family, in our tradition, turning to Jesus wasn't merely forbidden, it was viewed as the ultimate betrayal. Still, the peace I experienced in Jesus' presence was stronger than my fear. I prayed quietly each night, "Give me courage for what's coming." The confrontation happened on an evening when the sky blazed orange and pink with sunset. I just returned from the library, my heart full from reading about Jesus calming the storm on the sea. I felt that same calming presence settling inside me as I prepared to hide the Bible deeper in my dresser drawer. But as I was adjusting my pillow, my bedroom door swung open without warning. My father stood in the doorway. He looked exhausted but alert, his eyes searching my face. "Gabriela," he said quietly, "what are you hiding?" My hands began to shake. I forced a smile. "Just schoolwork, Papa." But as he stepped closer, the edge of the Bible slipped out from under my pillow where I'd momentarily placed it. He saw it. In an instant, his expression transformed from tired confusion to shock, then to something that looked like pain mixed with anger. He grabbed the Bible from my trembling hands. "What is this?" His voice rose. "Where did you get this book?" My voice disappeared. My lips moved but no sound came out. My mother rushed into the room, her face drained of color. "Please, let her explain. she pleaded softly. But my father wasn't listening. He opened the book and saw the name Jesus scattered across the pages. When he looked at me again, his eyes held a mixture of anger and deep hurt. "You have brought shame to this family," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. That night, silence filled our home like heavy fog. My mother wept in the kitchen. I sat in my room staring at nothing, feeling the weight of what faith sometimes costs. I didn't sleep. I spent the entire night praying silently, asking God to help my father see what I'd seen, to experience what I'd experienced. The next morning, my father didn't go to the mosque. He stayed home, shut in his room, and I could hear him praying for hours. When he finally emerged, his face looked aged, weary, but somehow less angry. He sat beside me without speaking for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "Gabriela, why do you believe in this Jesus?" My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it. I told him everything: the light that filled my room, the dreams that visited me night after night, the unexplainable peace that flooded my heart whenever I prayed in Jesus' name. I told him how Jesus taught me to forgive, to love without condition, to care for people without fear of rejection. My father listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he simply stood and left the room. For days afterward, he didn't speak to me. But I noticed him watching me from a distance, observing how I treated others, how I prayed quietly even in my isolation, how I continued to smile despite feeling so utterly alone. He didn't realize it yet, but the same Jesus who had touched my heart was already beginning his quiet work on his. If this story is touching your heart, this is your moment to join us. Subscribe now and become part of a community that believes in the transforming power of real stories. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Share how Gabriela's journey speaks to your own. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Let's build something beautiful together, a space where testimonies like this don't just inspire, they ignite change. After that confrontation, our home became strangely quiet, like the stillness before thunder. My father stopped inviting guests. His visits to the mosque became fewer and briefer. He didn't scold me anymore, but he also didn't speak much. Yet I could sense something shifting in him, something subtle but undeniable. Sometimes I caught him standing just outside my door when I prayed softly in the evening. He would pause, listen for a moment, then walk away. I never prayed loudly, but I always whispered words of love and forgiveness, asking God to show my father the same peace he'd given me. One evening, my father sat alone in our small living room. As I passed by, he called out softly, "Gabriela, sit with me." I obeyed, unsure what to expect. He studied my face for what felt like forever before asking, "When you pray now, what do you feel?" I chose my words carefully. "I feel peace, Papa. I feel deeply loved. It's like someone is holding my heart gently, especially when I'm afraid." He said nothing at first. Then he lowered his head and released a deep sigh. "I've prayed all my life," he said quietly. "I've followed every rule perfectly. But lately, I feel like God is distant from me." His voice cracked slightly. It was the first time I'd ever seen moisture in his eyes, the first glimpse of vulnerability beneath his strong exterior. I wanted to reach out and comfort him, but I remained still. All I said was, "He's closer than you think, Papa." A week later, I noticed him reading the Bible I assumed he'd destroyed or thrown away. He didn't try to hide it. He simply sat beneath the same mango tree where I used to read, the book open on his lap. I didn't disturb him. I simply prayed from my room, thanking God for what he was doing in my father's heart. The silence in our house no longer felt oppressive. It felt sacred, as though something holy was growing between the walls, in the spaces where words used to be. My mother began to soften as well. Though she said little, I often saw her glancing at my father, curious about what held his attention for hours. The peace that began in my heart was slowly, steadily spreading to my family, not through my arguments or explanations, but through the quiet, persistent work of the one who had changed me first. It was a night of heavy rain. Wind rattled the windows and thunder rolled through the mountains like distant drums. I couldn't sleep. Something deep within me urged me to pray. I knelt beside my bed and whispered, "Lord, please reach my father." Let him see you the way I have. As I prayed, that familiar warmth filled my room again, wrapping around me like the gentlest light. Then, in the quiet center of my heart, I felt that peaceful voice speak once more, "I am with your Father right now." I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I kept praying until sleep finally claimed me. The next morning, I found my father sitting outside beneath the mango tree. His eyes were red and swollen as if he'd been crying for hours. In front of him lay the Bible, open to the Gospel of John. He didn't look angry or confused anymore, just quiet and thoughtful, like a man who'd witnessed something that defied explanation. When he noticed me approaching, he said, "Gabriela, last night I couldn't sleep. I prayed and asked God to show me the truth, to reveal himself to me clearly. And then I saw light. Not from any lamp or window. It filled my entire room. I felt peace like I've never known. And I heard words inside me, not with my ears but deeper than that, Isa is the way, the truth, and the life." He looked down at the Bible as if afraid of his own words. "I don't understand all of it yet," he said softly. "But I can't deny what I felt. I can't pretend it didn't happen." My heart swelled with joy, but I didn't shout or celebrate. I simply smiled through tears and said, "Papa, that's him. He's been calling you too." He closed the Bible gently and looked at me with new eyes. "I don't know what this will mean for us," he admitted. "People won't understand. They may turn against us." I nodded because I knew he was right. But I also knew that the same Jesus who gave us peace would give us courage for whatever came next. That evening, he called our family together. My mother sat close, clutching her scarf tightly. My younger brothers looked curious and slightly confused. My father spoke with a calm strength I'd never witnessed before. He told us he'd found the truth, and that from this day forward, our family would follow Jesus, the one who brings true peace. Silence hung in the air. Then my mother began to cry, not from anger or fear, but from relief. She confessed that she too had seen a soft light near her bed the night before and had felt a comfort she couldn't explain. My brothers, though they didn't fully understand, sat quietly as my father prayed for us, not in the formal way we were accustomed to, but simply from his heart, speaking to God like a child speaks to a loving father. That night, our house became something new. The peace that once lived only in my heart now filled every corner, every conversation, every breath we took together. Not long after my father's decision, news began spreading through our village like wildfire. Someone from the mosque must have noticed his prolonged absence from daily prayers. Soon whispers began circulating among neighbors, then among his students, and finally throughout the entire community. One afternoon, while we were sharing a quiet meal together, a loud, aggressive knock shook our front door. When my father opened it, 3 men from the mosque stood there with hard expressions and crossed arms. One of them said coldly, "We've heard disturbing things, Imam Moreno. People say you've abandoned your faith. Tell us this isn't true." My father stood tall, though I could see his hands trembling slightly at his sides. "I have found peace in Isa, in Jesus Christ," he said clearly. "I cannot deny what God has shown me." The men's faces darkened with rage. "You're misleading the people," one of them shouted. "You, of all people, a teacher, a leader." They warned him to repent immediately or leave the town. My mother pulled my brothers close to her. I stood frozen behind the door, barely breathing. When the men finally left, slamming the gate behind them, the house fell into a heavy silence. My father looked weary but somehow at peace. "We will not fight them," he said quietly. "We will love them. We will pray for them." The days that followed tested us in ways I never imagined. Some neighbors stopped greeting us entirely, crossing the street to avoid us. Others threw stones at our gate under cover of darkness. Market sellers refused to sell us food. My brothers were taunted at school. Yet my father never raised his voice in anger or cursed those who persecuted us. Instead, he quietly visited some of them, helping when they fell sick, bringing food when their children went hungry. At first, they turned him away harshly. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. One of the men whose wife had fallen seriously ill came to our house late one night, desperate because no one else would help them for fear of contagion. My father went without hesitation, prayed gently with the family in Jesus' name, and sat with them through the darkest hours. Not long after, the woman recovered completely. Word spread quietly through the village that the fallen imam had prayed in the name of Jesus and someone had been healed. More people began visiting us secretly, slipping through our gate after dark, asking my father about the peace he spoke of with such conviction. He never argued with them or tried to win debates. He simply shared his story and what Jesus had done for him, for us, for anyone who would believe. I often sat beside him during these conversations, listening as he spoke with calm love to people who had once hated him, who had thrown stones at our home and cursed our family. The same community that turned against us was slowly beginning to see something different, not another religion with more rules, but a living peace they couldn't explain or dismiss. Our suffering became our witness. The storm that tried to destroy us became the very wind that carried the message of Jesus to others who were hungry for truth. Months passed, and our lives began to bloom again, not with comfort or ease, but with quiet, resilient strength. The people who once avoided us started coming more openly to listen to my father speak about Jesus. He no longer stood at the mosque's pulpit as a religious authority. Instead, he sat humbly under our old mango tree with his worn Bible in hand, sharing stories about forgiveness, sacrificial love, and lasting peace. At first, only 2 or 3 came, mostly the curious. But as time went on, more began to gather. Some still came at night to avoid being seen. Others brought their children, saying they wanted them to hear words that gave genuine hope instead of fear. My mother began serving tea to our guests, transforming our simple yard into a place of hospitality. I would sing softly, songs I'd learned from reading the Psalms, simple melodies that seemed to calm troubled hearts. I watched my father, the same man who once taught with stern authority, now teaching with gentleness and humility. He didn't try to prove anyone wrong or win arguments. He simply told them how Jesus had transformed his heart, and that same transformation was available to anyone who asked. I saw hardened men wipe tears from their weathered faces. I watched women who had once mocked us now bow their heads in sincere prayer. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, our yard filled with people. My father shared about the love Jesus gives freely, a love that forgives even enemies and transforms even the hardest hearts. When he finished speaking, a profound silence settled over the crowd. Then, one by one, people began to whisper prayers of their own, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. It was in that moment I felt that same warmth again, stronger than it had ever been before. It was as if the light that had filled my small room months ago now filled our entire yard, touching every person present. I didn't see anything with my physical eyes, but I knew with absolute certainty that Jesus was there among us, smiling, comforting, drawing hearts to himself with cords of love. This is more than a story. It's a living testimony of what happens when one person says yes to Jesus. If Gabriela's journey is moving you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And please, drop a comment below. Tell us what part of this story touched you most. Your voice adds to this growing chorus of changed lives. Together, we're creating a space where hope isn't just talked about, it's lived out loud. That night, my father told us something I'll never forget. He said that the love of God was never meant to be hidden behind walls or whispered in secret. The same Jesus who met us in private, he explained, is now calling others into his light, inviting them to experience the freedom we'd found. The next morning, we woke to find even more people waiting at our gate, farmers with calloused hands, merchants from neighboring towns, mothers carrying babies, all asking to know more about the peace they'd heard in my father's words and witnessed in our lives. Our small home became a continuous place of prayer and worship. Though we still faced threats from a few who remained angry and felt betrayed, the joy growing among us was infinitely stronger than any fear they could generate. The light that began in a little girl's room, sparked by a mysterious warmth in the darkness, had now spread to touch an entire village, shining quietly but persistently, changing hearts one by one, family by family. As more people came to hear my father speak, our home simply couldn't contain them all. The mango tree that once shaded just a few of us now had dozens gathered beneath its branches every week. My father never called it a church, but that's exactly what it had become, a gathering of hearts that had found peace in Jesus. Soon, people from neighboring towns began making the journey to visit us. Some had heard rumors about the former imam who now taught about forgiveness and sacrificial love through Christ. Others came simply to see if what they'd heard was actually true. They would sit quietly, sometimes skeptically, as my father shared our story, how light entered our home and changed everything, how persecution refined us rather than destroyed us, how love proved stronger than hate. One day, a family traveled over 2 hours from a distant town to meet us. The father explained that he had been one of my father's students years ago and had always deeply respected him. "If you, my teacher, have found truth in Jesus," he said with tears in his eyes, "then I want to know him too." My father wept openly as he prayed with them, and that moment marked the beginning of something far bigger than our single family's transformation. Little by little, small groups began forming in other towns. People gathered to read the Bible together, to pray, to learn how to live in the peace Jesus offers. The change wasn't easy or smooth. Some of my father's oldest friends turned away completely, refusing to acknowledge him in public. Once, when he traveled to a nearby town to speak, a group of angry men threw stones at him. He came home with a cut on his forehead but a radiant smile on his face. "Don't be sad, Gabriela," he said gently as my mother cleaned his wound. "Even when people hurt us, we will keep loving them. That's how Jesus wins hearts." His words became part of who I am. They taught me that real courage isn't about fighting back or defending yourself aggressively. It's about standing firm in love when the world pushes against you with hate. It's about blessing those who curse you, just as Jesus taught. As time passed, my father became known not just as the man who left the mosque, but as a messenger of peace, someone whose life had been radically transformed. My mother began teaching women how to pray from the heart and how to practice forgiveness in their daily lives. I helped with the children, teaching them stories from the Bible in simple words they could understand and remember. Sometimes I would sit under that mango tree at sunset, watching the golden light filter through the leaves, and think about how all of this began, with a small light in my room and a whisper in my heart. I realized that God often starts the biggest movements in the smallest, quietest ways. A child's prayer. A moment of divine encounter. A willingness to follow even when the path isn't clear. We didn't set out to change our world. We simply followed Jesus one step at a time. And he did something beautiful through our pain, our confusion, our persecution. Our story became a bridge for others to find the same love that had found us. Now years have passed since that first morning when light filled my room and peace entered my heart. I'm no longer the small, frightened girl who hid a Bible under her pillow and trembled at the thought of discovery. I've grown, and with that growth has come a deeper understanding of what it truly means to follow Jesus. I've learned that walking with him doesn't mean walking an easy path. There are still moments of pain, rejection, and profound loneliness. There were times when I asked why people hated us simply for choosing peace over fear, love over judgment. Yet in every moment of sorrow, in every season of persecution, I felt his hand near me, steady, warm, and absolutely unshakable. He never left us. Not when neighbors threw stones. Not when friends became enemies. Not when we felt completely alone. His presence remained constant, a light that no darkness could extinguish. To every believer who reads or hears my story, I want to say this with all my heart. Do not be afraid to stand firm in your faith, even when others don't understand. Especially when others don't understand. Courage in the face of persecution isn't about shouting louder than your accusers or winning arguments with superior logic. It's about loving when others hate. It's about forgiving when others wound you deeply. It's about trusting God when the path ahead seems impossibly dark. Jesus didn't promise us comfort. He promised us his presence. He didn't promise us popularity. He promised us peace that surpasses all understanding. And in my experience, that promise has proven absolutely true. The light that entered my room when I was 10 years old hasn't dimmed. If anything, it burns brighter now, spreading to more hearts, illuminating more lives, bringing more people out of darkness and into his marvelous light. This is what Jesus does. He meets us in our ordinary moments and transforms them into something extraordinary. He takes broken families and makes them whole. He takes persecution and turns it into testimony. He takes one willing heart and uses it to reach an entire community. Before you go, we want to invite you into this community one more time. If this testimony has touched you, if Gabriela's story has stirred something in your own heart, please subscribe to this channel. Click that notification bell so you never miss a story of transformation like this one. And most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? What part of this journey spoke to you most? Has Jesus met you in an unexpected way too? Your story matters. Your voice matters. Let's continue this conversation together. Because when we share what Jesus has done, we give others permission to believe He can do the same for them. Subscribe now, and let's walk this journey of faith together.